following takes place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Event secure. Only Untitled.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another week of FPC Radio Live. That's right, I'm Ian Blanton. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Aaron Rodgers, captain of the fan club, John Sapichetti. John, how's it going, my friend? Happy Monday.
Good
Welcome
morning.
to the show.
Happy Monday. Captain of the fan club, but always ready to criticize
That's true.
my son, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers and LeBron James, I will criticize them. Yeah, I will criticize when necessary.
Well, and that I'll give you credit. I mean, you know, again, when those are the two guys that you kind of champion, then you're going to have to you're going to have to accept some sort of defeat in situations like that. Wow. Apparently I'm getting some spam calls from Florida, folks. So I'm just going to end those right now. I don't need to talk to them. Actually, you know what? Maybe I should have just put it on air and we could have talked to them live and just kind of figured out what it is. Although, again, that'd be risking some sort of embarrassing phone call information of my own getting out there. And I don't know if I want that. So, yeah. So anyways, it's been I guess, eventful weekend, unless you're Major League Baseball, then it really hasn't. It's been kind of the theme over the first few weeks or so as we continue in this lockout. And, I guess we'll start right there because we haven't really had a chance to talk much about it because, well, football is kind of king. And then, basketball, I try to throw you a bone as much as possible. Any chance you can kind of talk about LeBron in the NBA, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I do want to talk about the lockout because it seems like it's just not going to end anytime soon. This is, it's frustrating if you're a baseball fan. And I've admitted to you, I've talked about this on the air. My interest in watching day-to-day baseball has not gotten any more intense over the years. It certainly, kind of waned a little bit. However, some of the things that they're suggesting, or at least have been talked about, most notably, in my opinion, the additional playoff teams, it's so, to me, it's just not appealing whatsoever. Like, first of all, and I think it was Will Middlebrooks on Twitter. He's been pretty active in a lot of this stuff, and a couple other players, former players as well. But you add additional playoff teams, and I mean, what's the point of 162 games then? Like, really, what's the point? Like, why? Why do we even bother? Why do we bother with divisions? Why do we bother with that? Like, I think ultimately we're gonna not like the additional playoff team in the NFL. I think playoffs should be reserved. It shouldn't. Like, I'm totally against reaching that 50% mark. In my opinion, like if half of your teams make the postseason, then what's the point? And I understand people like, oh, well, more revenue. No. I don't care about that. I mean, at a certain point, you have to be true to the competition, true to the spirit of the game, and reward those that actually deserve it. Like, I mean, look at the West in the NBA. Like, imagine if the NBA decided that they needed to add more playoff teams. Like, imagine that. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's your biggest issue. I know you have some issues with. I mean, there's so much information coming out about these proposals on both sides, and look, I just there hasn't been anything in my mind that's been like, oh, that's actually a pretty good idea.
I'm in favor of the pitch clock to speed the game up to increase the pace of play, which I think is a major issue.
Real quick, let me ask you this though. And how much time you actually take off? Is someone who complains about a game that lasts 3 hours and 10 minutes really going to watch a game that lasts 2 hours and 50 minutes? You know what I mean?
I mean, we know this in movies.
Sure.
Every movie today is 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it helps, but is that
but it's also
really...
it's more paced though. It's more paced than time.
Oh, sure, yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm not saying I disagree that it shouldn't be implemented. I'm just saying that I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people are assuming that adding a pitch clock is going to change. I don't know if it's necessarily going to change much.
It's part of the solution, though. So there's that. There's other things I've always proposed that kind of fall on deaf ears. Like, do we really need the manager to go out to change pitches? I mean, especially now where there's 7, 8 pitching changes per game because you bring a reliever in for 3 batters and then the next guy comes in and get all these matchups and you got to have a manager waddle out to the mound to take a pitcher. I mean, Bill Belichick doesn't send in his third down defense and he doesn't walk them in and walk back to the sideline with the players he's replacing. I mean, I think that's part of
maybe he should.
Yeah, maybe he should. Yeah, I'd like to see Matt Patricia doing that because it would take him forever to waddle from sideline to huddle. Yeah, so that's part of it too. It's more pace than time. So I think that would help. Just trimming little things like that. Also, the shift I think is something that we're going to talk about because in any other sport, there's certain parameters that you have. In basketball, you get teed up for zone defense. In hockey, you can't just send 5 forwards past the blue line or 3 forwards and 2 defensemen past the blue line. It's offside. Football even has restrictions because you have to cover up the tackle. So there's all different things that you have to follow the rules by. Baseball, you have the shift, which also increases the amount of time because now the players have to move from one side to the next, and it's just like it's forever. And it's also it's just taking away the excitement of the game. So I think those are all things that happen. As far as the playoffs, 14 teams is too much. I'm an evenist. I like an even number of playoff teams in each league. So that would give you 7. I would rather have 6. I'd rather have 4, but 6 would be better than 7. So I think that there's a lot of these issues, but do they really want to fix this? The owners don't want to see baseball in April because that's the least attended month. You sell the least amount of beer, especially in the Northeast. So they're going to get their national TV money, even if they sit out April or lock the players out in April. They're going to get their massive cable deals, and that's what really drives baseball, Ian, is the cable TV money. I mean, the Yankees make like $400 million a year from the YES Network. The Red Sox make about $200 million a year from NESN. That's guaranteed, unless everybody just decides to, do away with it, and it's all part of a sports package that everyone just blindly signs up for. So that money's coming in, the national money's coming in, the radio rights coming in. So in April, if you don't have to pay the players, but you don't have anybody coming to the games, you actually make more money or lose less money if that's the case. So I don't think they're going to come back till May 1st. I think they will come back. But at that point, it's like we'll be deep into the NHL and NBA playoffs. We'll have already had the draft. The NFL schedule will be released in May. I mean, it's almost like baseball, you have a window here to, kind of create some excitement, and you always push it away. I go back to 2 years ago. They could have come back July 1st instead of August 1st, 2020, and they would have dominated sports at that point. Heck, we were watching Korean baseball at 5 in the morning, right, to fill in the gaps. But there's baseball. No, we're not going to come back till August because that's going to be beneficial to the owners. They'll make more money with a 2-month schedule rather than a 3-month schedule. And there was a window there to say baseball's back. Open it up in July and you would have dominated. But they can't even see that, and that's really a shame.
Well, let me go back a minute and go back to the shift here, and I'll play. I guess I'll play devil's advocate here. My response would be, well, just learn to play small ball. Hit it the opposite direction. Yep. In terms of, because fundamentally, look, I think formational rules and stuff like that in football and other sports work naturally. They seem a little bit more organic. Like in football, you can't just you can't line an ineligible receiver wide out, by the sidelines, and you know what I mean. You can't mix and match. You can't have 3 receivers. There's a reason for that because it creates just a unfair playing advantage. In this situation, I feel like the resistance to the shift has also maybe coupled with this more shift towards launch angle and exit velocity exactly. and going boom or bust. Let's hit the big home run or the big hit, whereas a bloop single into the gap and you're beating that shift every time. So I'll ask you this: what do you say to just that as a solution as opposed to eliminating the shift altogether?
It's much more difficult to execute that than it seems. In other words, okay, let's just hit to the left side if they've got the shift on the right side. And again, the pitchers are going to pitch you a certain way so that you hit into the shift. So now you're really in a conundrum. the other part of that is that the shift was used essentially for all-time great players. Ted Williams, Barry Bonds, we'd seen that. Now, those guys could hit against anything. And now we're running the shift against, like, the number 7 hitter. And it's like, really? Is that what we want to see? The other thing, too, is, like you said, Ian, we've monetized home runs, walks, and strikeouts. That's why 40% of all plate appearances end in one of those 3 true outcomes, which is just a disaster.
Yeah.
It used to be around 27, 28% 20 years ago. So there was actually action in baseball. There's no action in baseball.
It's not going to get any better if they go to universal DH either. I mean, that's
right, because you're adding a hitter. Yeah, exactly. So now you're adding a hitter. So yeah, the shift part of it is, it sounds easy. Like, okay, if you're going to roll a shift and the third baseman is going to be essentially shortstop and everybody else is going to be on the right side of second base to try to hit the ball down the third base line. There's not a lot of guys that can really control the bat in that situation, quite like the all-time great players who could. So that it's a little more difficult than that. But I mean, that's the best way to beat it.
But look, I'm kind of, I see the, again, based on the comparisons to, again, some of the other sports formational rules and situations and stuff like that, I can see where it somewhat warrants it. But part of me, and you kind of said it right there, is like, yeah, that was usually, the all-time greats could beat that. But, we're talking about baseball here. Where are the all-time greats? I mean, someone sits there and tells me that Mike Trout is the greatest baseball player of all time, and you're telling me he can't beat the shift? You know what I mean? Like, okay, maybe I'm sure he can, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's more of an issue of maybe we just don't have that many all-time greats. I mean, baseball has a problem marketing. Well, is it a problem marketing, or maybe they just don't have as many marketable players? And
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really superb young players. I mean,
no doubt.
There's so many good young. I mean, Fernando Tatis. Here's the guy who I think should be the guy that they market the most. Now he's playing in San Diego, so a lot of West Coast games. I get that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Barry Bonds.
Plus, it's San Diego. I mean, again, that's You're working with arm tied behind your back there.
Right. But this is a guy who's extremely athletic. I mean, I'll watch his at bats. His strikeouts or his ground outs to second base are more exciting than a lot of other guys like doubles, triples, or home runs. He's athletic. I mean, he plays slightly, I wouldn't say out of control, but there's a lot of athleticism to his game, and I think you got to try to embrace that a lot more. Look, I'm hoping at some point that Theo Epstein is the commissioner of baseball, because the guy that's in office right now, Rob Manfred's a boob. And Epstein is being involved more now. I mean, he's no longer running the Cubs, and he's kind of come in as a consultant. And he talked about the best way we've got to fix baseball. We've got to bring more athleticism into it. Well, athleticism is not tied into baseball analytics. I mean, baseball analytics are complete opposite of embracing athleticism. It's more like, here's a computer printout, just follow it, we'll win. And the funny thing is, Ian, it does work. I mean, you're in Tampa. Tampa builds their entire roster around this, and every year wins 93 games and makes the postseason. I mean, it's pretty amazing on a limited budget. So in a sense, it does work, which makes it frustrating, but it's not really exciting. It's not something that fans are going to embrace.
Does it work, or does it provide reason to be satisfied with not winning?
Right.
Because
exactly.
Tampa, and I'm not taking credit away from Tampa. I mean, they've truly had to, especially given the division that they're in, and just the nature and business of baseball, they've had to work with kind of their arm tied behind their back. But it's like, are they truly successful? Because I mean, sure, they went to the World Series, but they didn't win. And I think people will sit back and say, you know what, you got to admire what the Rays are doing. I mean, all this, that, and the other. But it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, they navigated a tight payroll, but we're kind of shying away from the fact that they've never actually won I mean, we talk about teams that haven't won Super Bowls, and the Super Bowl has only been around for 55 years. And I understand. Look, the Rays obviously came into what year were they?
1998.
Yeah, 98. Yeah, 97, 90. I mean, we're talking almost 30 years at 25, 30 years, and it's like, okay, at what point do we stop just like saying, oh, well, they're good at analytics and they manage payroll well? Well, okay, great. that's awesome, but which is great for owners. Owners love that. I'm sure the Tampa Bay's owner, he's thrilled. He loves
Mhm.
this. But that doesn't equal success, certainly not in the eyes of the fans, or it shouldn't. And so
Yeah, I want to see stars. I mean, the Yankee teams that had a plethora of stars, that was fun to watch, right? The Red Sox and that was fun to watch.
let me ask you something. Do you think like guys like Jason Giambi and like David Ortiz would score well in analytics?
Yeah, they would actually,
Well,
because Giambi walked a lot.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true. That's true.
Walked a lot, and
That's true.
Ortiz.
Well,
They kind of brought Ortiz here because he did have a pretty disciplined eye, so I think that's part of it. And Ortiz got to the point late in his career where he was probably at about 40% in terms of 3-2 outcomes. So,
correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe this is just a perception, and maybe this is just a bit of nostalgia, because it certainly could be the case in my point. But we talk about stars and how the I don't want to put too much in character in the characters involved, because again, I mean, this isn't professional wrestling. It doesn't get lifted up, but there is something to say about this game lacking those type of players. And I'm talking, and again, you're going to say, well, common thread might be steroids, but no, I'm just talking about a certain era where, look, a lot of players may or may not have been on steroids, but you're talking about the A-Rods of the world, the Barry Bonds, these guys. I mean, like maybe Manny Machado is somewhat hated in that sense, but no one cares about Manny Machado. You know what I mean? Like people hated A-Rod, and it wasn't just Red Sox fans. People hated A-Rod, and they wanted to see him lose. Like, yeah, I don't like Manny Machado, but he's in San Diego. And it's Manny Machado. Like, who the hell cares about Manny freaking Machado? But like 15, 20 years ago.
Villain. Is there really a villain in baseball? Barry Bonds was a villain.
Oh, in the Bay Area, and there was a lot of villains. I mean, obviously the Yankees were villains, and part of it is too is like they're they're long removed from those obviously late '90s, early 2000 Yankees that were just anytime you counted them out, they come back. I mean, anytime you put them ahead, they fall back now. So it's kind of comical. Right. So there is part of that that's missing, but it's not just about that's the thing. It's not just about the big market teams, and that's kind of a misconception from people. Well, baseball is better when the Yankees are better. Look, baseball is great when people can trash on the Yankees. If they had a bunch of characters, baseball would be better. If there were people out there that you could again, I don't know if it's a unwillingness to market, if it's a inherent it's the chicken and the egg, John. Can baseball not market these players, or are these players not really marketable? Because you pointed out the NFL has characters. NFL, I mean, can wake up and sleep through the day and still market the game better than Major League Baseball does. And it's just inherent with the sport and the people involved. Basketball is naturally a more, this generation type of sport, because it's fast paced, it's highlight driven, and there are characters who are probably more, I'd say, in tune with the fans. You know what I mean? More in the same world. I don't know if that makes sense, but they seem to be a little bit more one-on-one with the fans. So there's a personality to that. So basketball's got that. Hockey. Well, that's different. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, a little bit different with hockey, obviously, because hockey's got such a niche, right?
Yeah,
it's got like a cult following, and it's so regional. Look at a player like. Just go to Twitter, like Tyler Hero, who is a really good player, probably going to be 6th man of the year, comes off the bench for Miami. He's a star. People know all about him. He's
What's the equivalent of Tyler Hero in baseball? Someone you've never heard of.
Right,
you know what I mean?
But Tyler Hero has more followers on Twitter than Mookie Betts.
Yeah.
And then there's even a player like Xander Bogaerts, who's my favorite Red Sox. I don't even think he has a Twitter handle. Like basketball, I mean, Kevin Durant has burner accounts, for God's sake. So, I mean, the characters, even Kyrie Irving, who's only played 16 games this year, and he's kind of a bore, but nonetheless, people talk about him because he's interesting, because they say things. Mike Trout is by all accounts, the best player of his generation, no question about that, although the last few years he's been banged up and not playing much. But, I don't even know what he sounds like. I mean, if he walked into my room here, I wouldn't know who he is, because it's just they haven't marketed him, but he's not interesting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of both of those things. Whereas even in football now, obviously the wide receivers and the cornerbacks have always been characters. Even now we're starting to see some personality with the quarterbacks, which is something that was always kind of pushed back against. Now you got Rodgers, you got Burrow, Brady's now all of a sudden big personality after leaving the Patriots.
And it's not necessarily necessary, and that's what I want to emphasize. Like I'm not, like I said before, I'm not saying that like we have to turn these sports into WWE where it's cutting promos and doing all that. You don't need to do that, but baseball used to have that. So you add that into the fact that again now you are trailing these other sports when it comes to care. I mean, hell, if you think about it, based on the current landscape of the world, I mean, hell, even hockey is getting more publicity with some of their stars because of their connections, the countries they come from. So it's just, to me, it's like baseball took a step back from what I thought was and look, maybe it was because of the steroid era. I've certainly been one to be more accepting of that era, let's say, not necessarily condoning it, but more accepting because, hey, it was what it was. And everyone was, and when I say everyone, obviously I'm saying that, when it comes to majority of players and coaches or managers, owners, certainly the media, and anyone who says otherwise is lying their face off because guess what? You know what it was back then? Good for business. So owners loved it. Owners didn't care. I mean, hell, look at the Yankees. I mean, like, talk about all steroid lineup of the of the 2000s. I mean, Jesus, I talked about Jason Giambi earlier, but it's like, I mean, they didn't care, and look, I don't blame them. I don't like. Like, if we want to sit there and criticize these people in hindsight, sure, why not? I mean, they deserve to have that mention. I've always felt that, like, you can sit here and throw stones in glass houses if you want. But the reality of it is, baseball wouldn't have been what baseball was without that era of baseball. And
especially after '94 strike, they needed to come back, and a little bit came back with Cal Ripken breaking the record. Well, but Sosa and McGuire saved the sport. And guess what?
They weren't Yankees players or Red Sox. Now I understand St. Louis is a big baseball market,
in Chicago too,
and Chicago, no doubt. But the common talk is, oh, well, baseball is better if the Yankees are great, or baseball is better if the Red. No, it doesn't. You don't need to. You can have teams in the Midwest.
Of course.
That if you have the right players in place, and unfortunately, baseball just doesn't have that.
The biggest issue I see with baseball, and I don't know how you would fix this, is we watched the Nets and Celtics yesterday, and it was a great basketball game. We saw Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant going mano-a-mano, and Tatum won out, scoring 54 points. Durant had 37. Can you ever have that in baseball other than maybe a pitcher's duel? And, oh, by the way, most starting pitchers go 4 2/3, and then they come out and the bullpen takes over. Like, there's no way that you get that in that sport. In football, we can get psyched up. Brady, Rodgers. Okay, this is going to be, exciting. 2 all-time great quarterbacks, or Brady, Manning, and there's a build up to that, and we'll see how that transpires. With baseball, it's like, okay, Barry Bonds is facing Ken Griffey Jr. Like, they don't play against each other, and they both may go 0-4. Or they might just get walked 3 times each, and we don't even get a chance for them to exhibit their incredible skills. Whereas yesterday we saw Tatum make a shot, and Durant make another shot, and Tatum make a shot, and Durant make another shot, and it was just fascinating to watch. We can't get that in baseball. It's just the way it's constructed.
And the only way you can really get that is you need a perfect storm. Not only do you need an absolute elite, normally pitchers are the closest thing you can do. You can create that with pitchers and hitters, because I go back to again, we're going to keep using the Red Sox and Yankees as an example here, but Pedro versus the Yankees. I mean, that was talk about that was appointment setting, because you're like, all right, Pedro's going to go. You never know what's going to happen. Is he going to point to his head? Is there going to be, some sort of, you're thrown up high, and then you go back and you go through these duels between those pitchers. And that doesn't just exist because you're division rivals. You have to be at the very top. So again, like I said, a perfect storm has to happen. Not only do you need these characters, but you need the teams to be relevant and to be the timing of it. Like, the games, Yankees Red Sox games in July are great, but like, when it comes down to it, it's August and September where it's like, during that time, that was when it really got to the point where it's like, oh, this is great. you just can't match that intensity the entire season. And it's the only sport you really can't do that. Like other sports have their lulls, sure. Football maybe is the only exception because the number of games. Like football is the only sport where it's like just a slow, steady climb up. Whereas like other sports, you have a peak, you have some valleys, you have a peak, and then eventually you skyrocket into the playoffs. Football is just a steady climb up where it's like you have a lot of interest right off the bat, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it boom busts at the Super Bowl. Baseball, again, initial interest in April, but then it just dips. And again, you start talking about adding additional playoff teams, and that dip becomes even more prolonged because then there's more meaningless baseball. And I'm not saying meaningless like, oh, of course you want to see these players play, but meaningless in the sense that like, what are you actually competing for over 162 games if more than half the competition makes the playoffs?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, look, last year the Atlanta Braves won the World Series. They played great the last 2 months of the season, but they had the worst record of every playoff team last year. They only had 88 wins, but they got hot at the right time. And now that can happen in football. We saw the Giants do it a couple of times. One year they went 10-6, the next time 9-7, went on and won a Super Bowl. Look, I'm a San Francisco Giants fan. They won 105 games last year. The reward for that was playing the Dodgers in the divisional round. The team won 104 games, and the Dodgers won in a 5-game series. So meanwhile, the Braves were able to kind of ease their way into things, and they got hot. And congratulations, that happens. I mean, that can happen in any sport. We've seen it even in hockey. Yeah, how many times have we seen in hockey where a couple of years ago, Nashville was an 8. The LA Kings did it twice. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Kings 10 years ago, they were the 8th seed.
Yeah.
Went and won the cup.
Did Nashville get to the finals one year as the 8th seed?
They were maybe not the 8th seed, but still, yeah, no, it's the same thing. Like, I mean, trust me, I'm a Bruins fan. I've seen plenty of number 1 seeded Bruins teams lose to 8th seeded Montreal teams in the past. So you don't have to remind. Oh yeah, you know how it is.
I'm so oldie, and I go back to 1971, which is still the Bruins' greatest team ever. The 71 Bruins did not win the cup. They won it in 70. They won it in 72. In 71, they just were a wagon, and they played the Canadians in the first round and lost in 7 games. I cried like a baby. I was 8 years old.
And Johnny Busick would agree with you because we actually asked him that question back in the day on the Big Bad Bruins podcast. You can't see it right now. I'm actually holding up a Blu-ray copy of that movie, Old. Remember I talked about that?
Okay.
It's still sitting on my desk. So you said, you're talking about how old you were. So I just figured, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to print out a picture of your face. Put it right on the front.
Put it on there.
There you go.
Well, you may want to use that program that aged people. Remember that was out a few years ago.
It's actually going to make you look younger.
It's going to be the opposite. It's going to be Benjamin Button. I'll be like Tom Brady. I'm going to go backwards.
Oh man.
Actually, when my friend did that, we were laughing. I started to look like Lee Iacocca, so it was pretty good at that point. So, not bad. He was a rich guy, successful businessman, fellow Paisan, so that would have been good.
There you go.
I honestly don't know how baseball fixes all this. I mean, you go to a 144-game regular season. I think that would be pretty good. But now you're talking about less revenue, right?
Yeah, well,
and the players going to come along for that? No.
I mean, look, if they got to keep it at 162 games, I'm okay with that because again, that's what it has been. I'm with you. I would reduce the number of games. I wouldn't mind going down to 140. Why not? Like, you know what? What's the point? Like, first of all, why do we need so many interleague games, anyways? It used to be that again, less is better, less is more. I mean, you actually get to look forward to that, and then it's like when it's April 7th, and I'm waking up and I'm like, we already have interleague play going on. Like, I remember when it was just like there was that stretch in the middle of the summer again during that lull. During that lull of baseball where it's like it's dead period. Well, guess what? How do you get excited for it? Well, you get to see some matchups that you only get to see this time of year unless it's the World Series. So maybe you go back to that, reduce the number of interleague games and confine them to a certain period of time, preferably when baseball and the game is at its slowest. Because guess what? That's how you manipulate excitement. Like, baseball has no idea how to do it. Like, how can you create, again, they have this ridiculous advantage, John, of being the only sport that has a large segment of the calendar completely to themselves. Like, think about it. Every other sport has to compete with another sport generally for the most part of I mean, basketball and hockey go concurrently. Football and those sports, they overlap for the most part. Football is played entirely essentially during the hockey season. Hockey starts, late September, early October, where, you know what I mean? So like baseball has months of no competition outside of, again, secondary sports and everything like that. People sit there and scream about soccer and all that. I don't care about soccer. I'm sorry. I just don't. Sorry.
Well,
it is what it is.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with baseball, though. Yet another problem with baseball is there's 15 teams in each league. You have to have interleague play every single day, or you're just going to give teams 3 days off, at a certain period of time.
Well,
now,
that wasn't a problem though 15 years ago.
Right.
So,
it used to be 14 and 16. So they said, let's be fair and have 15 in each league. So maybe go back to 14 and 16, where you don't have to have interleague play every day. I mean,
well, the Red
Sox ended their season last year against Washington.
Yeah.
They were fighting for a playoff spot against the Washington Nationals. That didn't make any sense.
No, I think again, I'm with you. I would, and I'm assuming you would actually like it to reduce the number of games. I'm with you though, in the sense that I don't think it's realistic because again, it hits at the pocket of the owners. Although again, I mean, one can argue that maybe the improvements to the overall game will eventually lead to bigger profits, but I don't think they think that, proactively. I think they're thinking more in the moment. How can I make a buck today? How can I turn a brick into $200? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But
Larry Lucchino did figure out how to do that.
Yeah, he did. Again, hats off to them. I got some bricks to sell you too if you want. I can write John. I can write your name on a brick and just slap it up on a wall somewhere if you want.
Nice.
$200.
I like that. Perfect.
Yeah, so I don't know. If you want an answer, I have no idea how baseball fixes it because not only do I think they have no clue what they actually want, but I think their instincts. I mean, they're like George Costanza. Their instincts are so bad. Like they should just start every instinct that they have. They should just start doing the exact opposite because really everything that they think the game has just gone backwards. They have, again, I don't want to call it advantages, but they have certain situations where they could dominate the viewing schedule and people will sit there, oh, it's the summer, people have vacation. I mean, baseball is the perfect sport for that time of the year. Like even if you're at a barbecue casually relaxing with a bunch of family, baseball is an appropriate sport to have on. Maybe football isn't in different sports like that because there's more attention needed to be paid, but baseball is perfect for that. Baseball is
in the background.
Yeah, exactly. It is the summer sport and they seem so adverse to embracing it. And it goes back to what you said before. They could have started on July 1st. Yeah, we're good. Oh,
yeah.
You missed a perfect opportunity to bring back the sport of baseball on the country's national holiday when, to your point, people were starved and stir crazy because of the pandemic and people were watching Korean baseball and they still sat there and said, no, we're good. We'll wait to start when everyone else does. And it's just like, okay, all right. I mean, again,
here's something that's going to look terrible in about a month. April 15th, not only is tax day, but more importantly is the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson. If the players are locked out on April 15th on the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson, which to me is the biggest moment in the history of sports, one of the biggest moments in the history of this country, how foolish will baseball look?
Oh, I mean, they already look foolish. I mean, this would just absolutely bury. I mean, it's and look, we're talking. That's a real threat at this point. I mean, because we're already first two series of the season, so we're talking. What, April 8th, 9th? We're at right now.
Oh,
so the next wave of cancellations is probably going to encompass that. So yeah, I'm again, the baseball is doing everything possible to get in their way and prevent and it almost makes me feel like they're wanting to do this on purpose. So I don't know.
It's going to save money. They don't play in April. It's like having a restaurant. You find out, well, you know what? If we close on Monday, we're going to actually not lose money that day. So at the end of the week or the end of the month, we're going to make more money. So let's close on Mondays. And that makes sense. I mean, that's a restaurant. That's a business. But baseball, the importance of it is, taking advantage of that first month when people are starved for baseball. Maybe you put a good product out. Next thing you know, people are excited.
Yeah, and it's like you can milk the opening of baseball for that entire month because at that point people are just you're not quite into the playoff season. Like you're getting there. Like playoffs usually start in hockey in April, and the same with basketball. So you're just getting there. I mean, you have a chance to just kind of grab people's attention and capitalize on that excitement. Like every sport, that first month is just such a cakewalk for them to promote, and baseball just doesn't. Like that first month of any sport, people are so excited for it to come back. All those diehard fans are into it. I mean, the month of September in football goes by so quickly. It's almost like you wake up from a drunken stupor after a night of binging, and you're just like, "Whoa, that was awesome! What just happened?" That month went by great, and then you kind of start really focusing. Baseball has that opportunity; they can do it in a month in which people are void of sport, and it's just not happening. And each and every year they just again, I don't know, continue to dig their own grave. It's a shame.
Yeah, it is.
But all right, well, we got 5 minutes left, so real quick, Jason Tatum's pretty good, huh?
Hey, he's pretty good. Yeah. I think he's going to make it in this league. Yeah, that was an incredible performance. When mano a mano against Kevin Durant. You know what? And I saw on Twitter yesterday. I'll probably agree. He's not Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is. I've said this a million times. The most varied.
Yeah, separate your personal feelings about Kevin Durant and his actual Durant ability.
Durant is actually basketball's Aaron Rodgers. I mean, like the game just looks so easy to him and fluid, but he always seems to step in his own, makes big problems out of nothing. And I'm sure Rodgers probably has burner accounts too. But Jason Tatum's probably the
John
closest
25.
Yeah, John burner account. How do you top that one? That's a great one. But Tatum's probably the closest thing to Durant. I mean, we're talking 6'9", 230. He's actually stronger than Durant. But like Durant, he's got a myriad of ways to score. At the rim, mid-range, transition, three-point shooting. He's had an off year, three-point, and he's long. And now the thing I like about Tatum, he's getting more and more aggressive. He also has a really good feel for the game, of course, as does Durant. And we saw a lot of really nice passes yesterday, including a lot of hockey assists. I thought the biggest play of the game is they were up 3 with 40 seconds left, and Tatum got doubled, kicked it out to Smart, who normally would just chuck up a 3, and next thing you know, the Nets, the chucker. Yeah, I mean, at that point, the Nets would get the rebound and have a chance to tie the game up. Instead, Smart made the extra pass. Jaylen Brown nails the 3 ball game. They're up 6 with 39 seconds left.
And
that was huge.
And those are the little things that you weren't seeing earlier in the season that made you question, was this the right coaching hire? Was this the right move? I think we all appreciate what Brad Stevens did a little bit more at the start of the season. I think people out there that were calling for his head at the end of the year were ridiculous to begin with. It's kind of like that Tuca hate. It's like, where's this coming from? Like how do you, but I think we're seeing obviously something start to really play out, because now it's like, I mean, how good is this team? I think we're starting to see quite a bit that, I mean, they just went toe-to-toe with the Nets. I mean, we've been hearing all along, wait until Kyrie and Kevin Durant play together. Well, I mean, we've been talking about Kyrie for years, and based on what he said yesterday, he's no less delusional than he was when he was here in Boston. And that's I mean, to actually think that those boos were a shunned by your ex type of boo is completely outrageous, and kind of speaks to Kyrie's just what goes on in his head. And look, I mean, I like to think about this, John. The relationship between the Celtics and the Nets over the last decade, and the the yin and the yang factor. Like, okay, the Celtics unload a bevy of stars. Paul Pierce, Kevin Durant, Kevin Garnett. To rebuild and grow this team, they end up getting these draft picks, and all of a sudden, these draft picks turn into high back-to-back, top 3 draft picks, and all of a sudden the Celtics are ascending, and they go to these multiple Eastern Conference championships. Well, then they take a step back, and all of a sudden, the Brooklyn Nets, they land James Harden, they land Kyrie Irving because Kyrie Irving was going to do something. He was going to do the exact opposite of what he had done in every place he had been to at that point, and that was lead a team
Mhm.
to a championship. And they went out and got Kevin Durant. And even though Kevin Durant missed the first full season, it was okay because Kevin Durant was great, and I believe that Kevin Durant is great. Well, the beginning of the season was okay for them. It seemed like they were doing what they were supposed to do. Now all of a sudden, look at how the pendulum is swung once again in this
Mhm.
relationship between these two teams. It's quite fascinating. And look, I think that the Celtics have always had in both these situations had the better long term prospect. I mean, look, Kevin Durant, as great as he is, I mean, he's obviously not a young player anymore. Um,
Mhm.
Clearly, Kyrie's shelf life with anyone in any team is so limited that you cannot count on it long term. So I'm looking at the Celtics. I'm like, well, Jason Tatum's only 24 years old. This is
Mhm.
Jason Tatum at 24 years old, and I'm just like, sky's the limit for the kid, and it'll be exciting
Yeah,
if yeah.
he's really growing, and I think more leadership type stuff. And sometimes, the bulb just goes on,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you're in your fifth year, and now you realize, okay. And I think Ime Udoka's done a really good job, and
Yep.
he said earlier in the season, because I think Tatum, like every other young player, they look up to Kyrie and Durant and LeBron because
Yeah.
they want to be like them.
You
And
gotta
Ime
you gotta
Udoka's
get that out of your
you
system.
got to get out of that.
And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure quarterbacks when they see Tom Brady look across and go, "Oh, that's Tom Brady." Like the first quarter and a half of the game, you're in awe of the guy, which is great. It's respect. I get it. You can still pay respect to these guys, but you can't be in awe of them and bow to them. And like Ime Udoka says, he's got to get out of the mindset that these are his older brothers, and that he's got to go out and try to battle them. And I think he's starting to learn all this stuff. The talent's always been there. I mean, there's not a lot of guys in the league, maybe three that are 6'9" that can do as many things as
Mhm.
Jason Tatum. I mean, he's a pure talent. So it's going to be fun, and this is going to be a great stretch. The one thing I'd caution on the Nets is, well, if he ever comes back, Ben Simmons, I think, could be a real big X
Yeah,
factor
well,
for them.
I'm not holding
We'll
my
see
I'm
if he
not
comes
holding my
back.
breath. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
holding
mean,
my breath at that point.
is he coming back? What kind of state of mind is he going to be in? Because I'll guarantee you that engaged Ben Simmons was playing yesterday. I don't think Tatum gets 54 because he's an elite defender. But the last time we saw an engaged, healthy Ben Simmons was more than a year ago.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you when. So I was going to say, and I'll end it at this: the only person growing quicker than Jason Tatum might be Deuce Tatum. So that guy's going to be 6'5" by December. I am convinced of it. So all right, that's going to do it for us here today. We will be back on Wednesday. We're doing our Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. We'll eventually get back to more of a full week, especially with NFL free agency coming up very soon. And of course, the playoffs in the NBA and NHL coming up as well. So everyone give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live, at Full Press Radio, and of course, head over to fullpresscoverage.com, fullpresshockey.com. Check it out and give us a follow. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day.